Welcome back to another episode of the Holocore. Today's episode pulls archived information from the Halls of Valor itself, as we feature the Warswords of the Valarjar. Long before Odyn's imprisonment, the Prime Designate oversaw the creation of his immortal army, the Valarjar. Souls of slain Vrykul were carried up to the Halls of Valor, where they could spar, drink, and tell tales of their glorious death among their kin. In order to prepare and properly mold these spirits into his perfect warriors, Odyn had the greatest blacksmiths of his Valarjar craft weapons and armor at his enormous forge. One smith in particular stood out amongst the others with his skills, and eventually, Odyn directly encouraged him to focus his craft on a weapon fit for an offensive, aggressive fighting style. The smith complied and set to work on his forge. When he was finished, he presented not one but two magnificent warswords to Odyn, who gazed upon them in awe. Odyn was so impressed by the intricate yet deadly designs of the swords that he took them and empowered them with his blessing, infusing the blades to their core. Odyn hung them high in the Halls of Valor and used them to motivate his warriors.
These will be carried into battle by only the greatest among you. So go then, prove yourselves worthy.
Out of the thousands of Vrykul to enter Odyn's stronghold, only one Vrykul would wield the swords. His name was Ingvar, and in life, he was a master of blade and slaughter. Before he ascended, Ingvar would lead a raiding party into a cave network that seemed to arouse suspicion among the locals. Within the cave, the Vrykul found countless creatures that had been warped and twisted by the powers of an old god. Although the Titan Keepers had defeated the old gods eons before, their dark influence still crept through the land. Ingvar and his warriors were outnumbered, but they did not run. Although the Vrykul hacked and slashed their way through the dark creatures, many of them fell within minutes. Ingvar continued his fight, even as his last comrade fell at his side, and despite the overwhelming injuries he sustained, the Vrykul warrior cut down every last corrupted creature in the cave. As Ingvar collapsed among the butchered bodies of his friends and foes, Helia herself appeared and carried his spirit up to the Halls of Valor. There he was greeted by Odyn and showered with praise. His sacrifice and determination had resulted in a victory against all odds, and for this, Odyn bestowed his warswords upon him. With these weapons in hand and a new Stormforged body to carry him into battle, Ingvar would arise to lead many of the Valarjar into combat. Ingvar's story among the Valarjar was not meant to last forever. As Odyn's Valarjar grew, so too did Helia's hatred towards the Prime Designate. Although Helia ferried the Vrykul souls up to the Golden Gates, she did so with rage and resentment. Odyn had forcibly turned her into a Valkyr against her will, before commanding her to do the same to unwilling Vrykul. When Keeper Loken fell under the sway of Yag Saran, he struck a bargain with Helia and freed her from Odyn's control. In exchange, Helia called upon the arcane energies swirling around Azeroth and sealed the Halls of Valor shut, locking Odyn and his armies within. Only a few members of the Valarjar had been outside the halls during Helia's betrayal. Among these was Ingvar and his legendary warswords. Ingvar set out to track Helia down, bring her to justice, and free the Prime Designate. Although Ingvar was a paragon of strength and valor, the Stormforged warrior knew he faced little chance against Helia. Yet despite her dominion over the spirits of the dead and vast energies at her command, Ingvar confronted her and charged in. Astonishingly, Ingvar held his ground against the Valkyr, and in his hands, the warswords nearly proved to be too much for Helia. Despite the power that radiated from these weapons, Helia ultimately persevered and triumphed over Odyn's champion, smiting Ingvar into oblivion. As the swords fell to the ground, Helia claimed them as a trophy in her victory over Odyn. For millennia, Helia gathered the souls of the dead Vrykul and twisted them into corrupted undead creatures called Kavaldir. As a mockery to Odyn's imprisoned Valarjar, Helia raised her own army of champions called the Helajar of Helheim and set them loose to wreak havoc upon Azeroth's seas. Helia's domination over the souls of the Vrykul grew more and more insidious as the ages passed. Helia's heart had become filled with darkness after her conflict with Odyn and the deal she made with Loken. The once noble Titanforge sorceress had become a fiend of shadow and malevolence, and all those who served her suffered greatly. Many of Helia's servants had been great and fearsome warriors in life. In death, they became even more dangerous. Among her faithful Valarjar, one Kavaldir stood out in particular. His name was Vigfus Bladewind, and his faithfulness and eagerness for bloodshed earned him the right to bear the prized swords of Odyn. To add insult to the fact that Odyn's blessed weapons were to be used to slaughter his own champions, Helia bestowed a fraction of her own power upon the Warswords. Vigfus wielded these blades in his attacks against the Vrykul, and wherever he struck, slaughter and bloodshed lay in his wake. Sometimes, Helia would test Vigfus to see if he was still worthy of wielding the weapons. At her command, he descended upon Vrykul settlements alone, with no other Kavaldir to fight at his side. In his wake, Vigfus left a feast for the crows and vultures who circled overhead. For thousands of years, Vigfus butchered and slaughtered in Helia's name. It was only recently that Vigfus met his match on the battlefield, when one of Odyn's champions tracked the Valarjar warrior down and engaged him in battle. Vigfus called out to Helia for aid, who empowered her champion and his swords with another burst of power. Despite the surge of dark energy, Vigfus fell, and the Warswords of the Valarjar were once more claimed in Odyn's name. Although these weapons were made to be wielded by the fiercest of warriors, it's the energies within that truly make these weapons devastating. Helia's power, and the white-hot vengeance she holds for the Prime Designate, clash and battle Odyn's own blessings that surge through the swords. These feuding spirits give the weapon's wielder untold power and prowess in battle, but requires an indomitable will if one hopes to ever fully control these legendary warswords.